business. Councillor Crombie, Councillor DeMarilla, Councillor Fortini, personal, Councillor Santos, other municipal business, and the chair is on other municipal business. We'd like to begin by acknowledging that the land we are gathered on which the Region of Peel operates, is part of the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississauga's New Credit. Peel Region, the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, Iroquois, and home to the Métis, was most recently the territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. On this day, our meeting place is still occupied by many Indigenous peoples, First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, from across Turtle Island, North America. We are grateful to have this opportunity to work on this land, and by doing so, we give our respect to its first inhabitants. Declarations of conflict of interest. Seeing none. Approval of the minutes. Item 3.1, minutes of September 26, 2019, Regional Council. Moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Starr. All in favor? That carries. Approval of the agenda. Would anybody like to add, delete, remove, or change the agenda? My apologies, there are already changes to the agenda. That the agenda for the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council meeting include a delegation item regarding Regional Council's consideration of a motion denouncing Quebec's Bill 21, and further that the agenda for the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council meeting include an in-camera communication item regarding local planning appeal tribunal, City of Brampton, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals, and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for the purpose to be dealt with under in-camera matters, item 21.8. And further, that the agenda for the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council meeting be approved. Moved by Councillor Kovac, seconded by Councillor Groves. All in favor? That carries. Our consent agenda. I'll skip over delegations, staff presentations, and I'll go right to holding item 8.1, public health transformation update. Move to item 10.1. Hold. 11.1 and 11.2. Hold.
No. Consent. Was 10.1 on consent or held?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's on 10.1's on consent.
Right.
11.1,
You want to hold 10?
holding 10.1.
Okay.
11.1, 11.2, consent. 12.1, holding. 12.2, consent. 14.1 and 14.2 are being held. 14.3, consent. 14.4, consent. On to communications item related to public works. Communication from 17.1, holding. 18.1 is being held. 19.1, 19.2 are being held. 21 in camera. 21.1, consent. 21.2, consent. 21.3, consent. 21.4, consent. 21.5, consent. 21.6, consent. We are holding 21.7.
The additional correspondence, 21.8.
And the additional correspondence, 21.8, consent. Can I get a mover of consent? Councillor Raz, second by Councillor Thompson. All in favor? No. Recorded vote. That carries. Councillor Dillon, can you vote? Sure.
Sorry, did the, I think yeah, 21.4, I didn't want it to go in consent.
21.4 is removed from consent.
No.
So we'll hold 21.4.
We're holding 21-4.
We still need people to vote.
We still need everybody to vote.
Councillor Mahoney,
Councillor Mahoney.
and Councillor, yeah, now we're good.
We're good. That carries. On to our delegations. And we have a very special delegation here today, and I'd like to ask for Chief Dundas to come up and provide a little bit of introduction. Chief Dundas, do you mind coming up? Telling us a little bit of story about what we're going to hear today.
And members of council, it's my distinct privilege to be here today to introduce some very important guests from Nunavut in respect to ambulances that Peel paramedics and the Region of Peel donated to them just recently. But let me tell you a bit of a story. Imagine a little one gets hit by a car just outside of this building, and all we have is a pickup truck and somebody running to a house, knocking the hinges off, grabbing a door and putting that little one on that door in the back of a pickup to a community clinic. And if that little one is so severely injured, has to be flown all the way to Montreal, Ottawa, Winnipeg, or Yellowknife from Nunavut. That's what happens in Nunavut. And it was observed by John Perno, who I'll introduce shortly, son when he was up there. And he came back and he said, "Dad, we got to do something." And John, I've known for close to 40 years, is quite involved with volunteers, and he took up the charge to say, along with some other people, we need to help our own people in our own country with healthcare. And that's what we've done. John wrote to us in the early part of this year. I read the letter. I heard the story. And there was nothing more than I could do as walk down the hall to my manager of logistics and saying, I want to know how many trucks I can send to Nunavut. And yes, we followed all the procurement bylaws and everything of such, if just in case. I need to cover myself. But part of this journey wasn't just the ambulances, it was getting them ready, providing equipment for them, stretchers, some fracture boards, and the basic equipment that you need in these ambulances. But they also had to get to the shipping yards in time to make the shipping routes. And these journeys going to Nunavut on the barges, and that's the only way they get materials into Nunavut in the majority of the time is through the barges or through air cargo ships, is we drove them to the shipyards in Quebec to be able to board and get them there after probably a 4 to 5 week journey on a boat. They don't have docks there. They just bring the barges onto the beach, open the gate, and all their supplies come off. And the stories I was told this morning was everybody, the whole community, was gathered just to see this ambulance that was coming off, to be able to see it, and trying to figure out how all the buttons worked inside it. And when we heard about the buttons and not knowing, we made a YouTube video and sent that over to them so that they knew exactly how to do it. So 4 communities in Nunavut now have retired Peel Regional Paramedic Service ambulances with stretchers, fracture boards. I do plan on organizing more for next year to be shipped when the shipping lanes are open again. 14 communities require this in Nunavut, and we want to be able to make that happen. So I'd like to introduce, and excuse me if I get the pronunciations wrong of last names. I told them I would apologize up front. Celestino Urarik, Mayor of Igloolik. Joanna Quassa, Councillor. Greg Marash, Senior Administrative Officer. John Perno, who is a retired paramedic chief from the region of Waterloo. And Simon Kintankin, Mayor of Tololik, to come forward and speak to members of council. So please have a seat.
Thank you, sir. Uldakut, Annette Angutilu. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's so pleasant to be here this morning. if I feel nervous, don't be surprised. I am nervous. But we are very thankful to mayor and council and paramedics that allowed us to have ambulances in our community. Like the gentleman said, over 30, well, about 30 years, we have this issue with trucking business with our medevacs and having to have this ambulance in our community. And community knew that we had an ambulance. It was so pleasant story. Like we were like when the ambulance came out from the barge, we had Greg, CAO Greg, and ourselves went for a ride. We had kids running behind us when we had this siren, and they thought it was a fire truck. And that's the only siren that we have. But driving around the community and having to have this ambulance around, yeah, we had a lot of kids following us behind us and going, yeah! And it feels safe. It feels safe for our patients, clients, not only children, but elderly people who cannot walk or disability can use this ambulance in 40 to 60 below weathers. And that's what we have in Arctic, 40 to 60 below weathers. And we have these pickup trucks, patients back up the truck, and they're strapped, are tied up, and they cannot move, and they could wait anywhere between 10 minutes to 2 hours. And this ambulance is so useful, helpful, and we are so thankful to everyone from Brampton. Kuyanami.
And the region appeal, Mississauga and Caledon.
You're getting us in trouble.
Kuyanamik, my name is Simon King Oktok. I come from the community of Telok on the Gulf of Boothia. Our population is 1,076. And I'm very proud to say welcome to the region of Peel. Thanks a lot for welcoming me to your city. I feel very proud to be one of the first 4 communities in Nunavut that is owning an ambulance in our community. We have 25 communities in Nunavut. I'm very proud to say that we were one of the first 4 communities that received the ambulance, and I'd like to thank the region of Peel for the donation of the ambulance, and most of all, I'd like to thank John for giving us this information, and it's very important for our community. As you may not know, the only transportation that we get up north is the airlines. We don't have highways like down here. You know, it may take days before we could get our supplies. And we received our ambulance on our annual sea lift, which comes into the community once a year. And that's how we get our supplies within our community. Like the cities down here, we don't have highways. It's very hard to get our supplies into our communities. It may take, you know, a week, 3 weeks to get our supplies into our communities, and it's very important. And on behalf of our community of Telok, I'd like to thank the city for the donation of the ambulance. As you may know or may not know, that our community up in the Arctic is very cold, and like my colleague said, that, you know, our temperature is -40, -50. And the only way we transport our patient in our community is with a pickup truck, back of the pickup truck. And it's very hard for the patient. Like I said, I'd like to thank the city of Peel for welcoming me to the community, the city of Peel. And on top of that, Kuyanamik, thank you
Thank you.
Yes, my name's Greg. I'm the CAO of Igloolik, and we worked for 2 years to get these ambulances up. The first thing we did with the ambulance, we did a live exercise, mock plane crash.
Excellent.
And I got really upset because the ambulance didn't show up. But what happened is it had another medical emergency. A real one. A baby was 6 weeks premature. The mother was not in good health. Because of that, the incubator, I don't understand all its medical terms, wouldn't have fit in a half-ton truck. So thank God we got that. It took them 4 hours to stabilize the baby and the mom. And I can say they've been down there for about 5 weeks now. The baby is stable, the mother's stable. And without that ambulance, it could have gone the other way. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Joanna?
Joanna Koisa, I'm the councillor in Igloolik. First of all, I would like to say, koyan na me tunga sukti taugata, pivakakti taugata, koyariak tolduta. First of all, I would like to say thank you for welcoming us and giving us a chance to say thank you to you. I would like to present this art to Region of Peel, our way of saying thank you. It's an art of a little girl dancing, which was drawn by Jack Howley, who is my nephew. So we would like you to take this as our way of saying thank you for those ambulances.
Thank you very much, and we will hang that proudly up on our walls. Thank you. If this says anything to any level of government, what we've been able to do here today is just a drop in the bucket compared to what the feds can do for our Canadian friends in the north. We have a few members that would like to say something. Councillor SAITO.
Thank you, and welcome to you all. You've had quite a journey to get here. Listening to you speak, I feel very humbled. We are, we complain when our funds get cut for ambulance service, for other services, but seeing and hearing what you are facing, what your citizens are facing, makes some of our complaints seem very trivial. And I want to say to our staff, to our paramedic staff and Peter and all of the staff who made this happen, that I am so proud of all of you for taking this step. And I'm proud of our council for being able to utilize equipment that we could consider surplus in such a very positive way. And your example of the mother and the baby who survived and are doing well because of that, it's just very heartwarming. And I know, Peter, you said we would be sending, where are you? You're over there. That next year we would be sending more ambulances when you're able to transport them. And this is what we do. This is what we should all be doing, is helping our neighbors. And you may be a neighbor from far away, but you are still one of our neighbors. And I'm just so glad you were able to be here today so that we could put a face behind this action. I mean, to us it was, yes, we sent the ambulances, but for you to be here today and to hear that story just really makes it all worthwhile. So thank you for coming here.
Thank you, Councillor SAITO. Councillor Thompson.
Yes, it's the Mayor of Caledon. We want to thank you. I hope you're being able to enjoy and being shown around Peel while you're here to see what all we have. I have to say, in Caledon, we have the local fires at the local municipalities. So our older trucks, as they get aged out, we've been working with the First Nations and in the north, supplying or getting the trucks to them so they can serve and they still continue to serve in the communities up there. And, you know, that's something that maybe I'll put a challenge out to both Brampton. We'll work through Peter, because you've got the pipeline now. But I know with Caledon, Brampton, and Mississauga going forward, as our trucks age out, they're still in perfect shape. If there can be of any service to you as well, we'll do our utmost to see what we can do to assist you with that as well. If you need, you know, fire trucks as well as ambulances, but this is just another way to continue on. My son is a pilot now in the north that services communities like yours all the time. It's good education for him as well and has a greater appreciation for the country, and it's for people and how blessed what we have. But going forward, we'd surely enjoy, because I know we always put our trucks out for tender if anybody can use our old fire trucks. They can be utilized, but maybe this is something now that we have, and if you can utilize them, we'd be only too glad to work with you going forward. And I know I can speak on behalf of Callan, but I'll put the challenge out to, the mayor's here from Mississauga, but I'm sure that we can definitely work with you that way as well.
Thank you. I think the challenge has been accepted. Councillor Raz.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for coming today, and it's an honor for us to have you here. It's probably the least we could do, and it's not to minimize the work that Peel paramedics have, what they've done to get the ambulances there, but one of my schools in my ward, they do an exchange program. The students in the grade school do an exchange program with a school from Nunavut. And when we come back, or when each of them have done their exchange, everybody gets together from the whole school, and they go through the slideshows, and the basic needs that we know aren't being met up there is a disgrace. And if this is something that we can do to help you, we are happy to help. And Mr. Chair, I'm wondering if maybe we can put forward a motion or something to AMO to suggest these are some of the things like ambulance or fire trucks for those that get retired to donate to the north. So maybe I'll work on the wording, maybe I'll bring it back to the next council meeting. But I think it's something that we can let our other municipalities know that these are options for them to help you up in the north as well. So thank you very much for coming today. I almost was in tears when you're talking about the story of the mom and the baby, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Raz. We'll officially accept that as a notice of motion for next council meeting. I'd be honored to come around and accept the painting. So members of council, I have another certificate that was provided here, and I'd like to take a minute and read this out. It says, the Peel Region Paramedic Services, on behalf of the community of Taliok, Nunavut, on the Gulf of Boothia Peninsula, we thank you to the Peel Regional Paramedic Services for the ambulance. We, the people from the community of Taliok, Nunavut, would like to thank you for choosing our community to receive a donated ambulance. Once again, thank you for your help. And that was signed by the Mayor of Taliok. Thank you very, very much. Members of council, we move to item 6.2. Sharonjeet Kaur, Vice President, World Sikh Organization, Canada, regarding Regional Council's consideration of motion denouncing Quebec's Bill 21, also related to item 6.3 and 19.1. We have an additional delegation of 6.4. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good morning, Regional Chair, respected councillors, Madam CAO, and members of the executive leadership team. Thank you for the opportunity to delegate today on the matter of Bill 21, Quebec's secularism law. My name is Sharonjeet Kaur, and I'm here in my capacity as VP of Ontario for the World Sikh Organization of Canada. The WSO is a national organization, 35 years old, and with a mandate to promote and protect the interests of Sikhs in Canada and advocate for the protection of human rights for all. We have been to the Supreme Court of Canada on numerous occasions, fighting and protecting the rights of Sikhs and other faiths to freely practice their religion. Our board reflects the diversity of the Canadian Sikh community, having strong representation across all regions and by being gender balanced. The WSO's executive is over 50% women, and all are below the age of 40, although I'll be honest, that 40 threshold is making me nervous now. I raise this demographic breakdown because over the last few years, our organization has seen an overwhelming response from the number of young people and individuals from all walks of life, be it working parents or grad students, reaching out and wanting to become involved, because there's something happening in Canada and across the world that's feeling very unsettling. WSO has spent almost the last decade fighting the growing sentiment of intolerance towards faith-based communities in Quebec. This all came to a head with the passing of Bill 21. Very simply, Bill 21 prevents judges, police officers, teachers, and public servants from wearing articles of faith such as the turban, the hijab, or the kippah while at work. When our community first heard of Bill 21, our parents and grandparents started to recall the trauma of what they faced when they first came to Canada. How many of our fathers and brothers were told to cut their hair and remove their turbans to gain employment? And after all the gains that we have made, how could we be possibly turning the clock back now? And if anyone still believes that this is an exaggeration, our very own WSO VP from Quebec region, Amrit Kaur, is a Dastar, turban-wearing woman who recently trained as a teacher. Over the last 2 years, we have watched her complete her studies while also fighting Bill 21, to inevitably have to leave her family and friends in Montreal to now move to BC so that she can follow her passion to be an educator and still be true to her Sikh identity. Choosing between faith and employment are not choices we should have ever had to make. Our parents made them in the 1970s and 80s, and we are again being forced to make them today, on the cusp of 2020. I bring forward the lived experience of my community, but we are not alone in this fight. We are joined by our Muslim, Jewish, Christian, interfaith, and non-faith brothers and sisters. We feel the pain and fear of what this bill is doing to our society. We are already seeing the rates of hate crimes increasing in Quebec. We fear what this will mean for the rest of Canada. I also sit in front of you today as a proud public servant. I had the privilege to work for you as a Region of Peel employee for over 7 years. I've also worked with the provincial government and most recently joined Sheridan College. I don't know where my career trajectory will take me next, but I do know that it will always be within this sector in the service of my community. And as a public servant, I can say with complete and utter confidence My choice to practice faith and proudly wear my articles of faith have only helped my ability to connect and deliver services to our residents. And finally, I'm here before you as the mother of 2 young children. Children who are acutely aware of what is happening around them. I am the mom who had to explain the morning news story to her 11-year-old son as he ate his breakfast and I tied his turban, as to why Jagmeet Singh was faced with yet another altercation with a racist individual who insisted Jagmeet Singh, quote unquote, cut his turban to become Canadian. And then I had to turn to my 8-year-old daughter and reassure her that there are good people out there and that these are just the outliers. But my personal fear is this. Bill 21 presents terrifying constructs that are not being challenged by our leaders, by our institutions, by our neighbors, and by our friends. This normalizes a sense of distrust for people that look different. This normalization then leads to the validation of intolerance. And from this, we will only see the proliferation of hate. We are seeing it already. The question is, when will we stand united to stop it? The National Council of Canadian Muslims and the Canadian Civil Liberties Association have filed a legal challenge against this law. The World Sikh Organization of Canada has also joined this legal challenge. But the fight does not stop with organizations like ours, with public servants and moms who are directly affected like me. The fight against Bill 21 needs everyone in this chamber and all similar chambers across Canada to reflect on how they want to be remembered in history at this moment in time. I commend the City of Brampton for being the first municipality in Canada to pass a motion against Bill 21. I also sincerely thank Councillor DHILLON for bringing this matter to Regional Council today. I am grateful to hear that the City of Mississauga is considering a similar motion, and I am hopeful that the town of Caledon will do the same. Some have questioned the relevance or impact of passing motions such as these. I urge you to, again, appreciate what these motions truly represent. This is our opportunity as Canadians to firmly take a stand against the laws that create a space for intolerance. Your residents that once again are feeling marginalized need to hear from their respective leaders that you stand shoulder to shoulder with us against the sentiments that are driving these laws and the broader impacts that they have on society. Bringing forward these motions will also keep this conversation relevant. Because again, this issue has not yet experienced the level of outrage and response we should have demanded as Canadians. And lastly, these motions will put on record that you, as community leaders, as our councils, will not tolerate intolerance. I will leave you with these words from Benjamin Franklin. Justice will not be served until those who are unaffected are as outraged as those who are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thompson, do you have questions of clarification for the delegate? Or
No, I just want to give her assurances that it will be coming to Caledon as well. And I will speak towards the motion when we get there.
we'll leave you on the board then. Councillor Crombie, questions of clarification for the delegation?
So, there, ditto. So we didn't bring it forward yesterday because we wanted Councillor DHILLON the opportunity to do this today, and of course we support him. I thought we might bring the motion forward though too, so we can all speak to it right after the delegates, and I'll stay on the board as well so we can speak. And we agree. Councillor Carlson over here leaned over and said, "Hey, Crombie, you always say that too. We have no tolerance for intolerance."
We've brought the motion forward. We're going to get through the delegations, and then we'll open it up to speakers. Thank you very much for coming. Next, we have Gurpreet Singh Twar, Regional Board Member, World Sikh Organization, regarding Regional Council's consideration of motion denouncing Quebec's Bill 21. Or I should have just said, come on down, Guru. Welcome.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, honorable mayors and members of this council and members of audience. My name is Gurpreet Singh Twar. I am here before you as a regional board member of the World Sikh Organization and more importantly, as a resident of Peel. Bill 21 reinforces systemic racism and discrimination in Canada. 8 years ago, I moved to Canada with the hopes of starting a new life with my family. I went to university here, started working, and built a great relationship with the community around me. I'm lucky to have so many friends from different walks of life who gave me advice and support I needed to establish myself and build my career. I've been fortunate enough to work alongside some of you for 4 years at the mayor's office in the city of Brampton. These experiences not only gave me the great opportunity to serve our community, but also instilled in me values for living a good life. My story would not be possible if it took place in Quebec in 2019. Bill 21 reinforces systemic racism and discrimination in Canada. People from different cultures who wear the articles of faith cannot teach in schools. They cannot serve in any public office. They cannot see people like them in leadership roles. Around the table as well, we see the example of Councillor DHILLON right here. We see members of our police force that wear articles of faith. Things like these would not be possible in Quebec. Bill 21 will drive out of Quebec these people who possess invaluable knowledge, talent, and experiences. Where in Peel region diversity forms the fabric of multiculturalism, Bill 21 in Quebec shreds it to pieces. I would not have gotten the same experiences at my university. I would not have learned many valuable life lessons. I would not find my place in society. And I would not have had the opportunity to serve our community. As much as this is my imaginary thought, it is going to be a reality for hundreds of thousands of people just like me. Again, Bill 21 reinforces systemic racism and discrimination in Canada. What makes it worse is that this discriminatory legislation is being disguised as a Quebecois value. Doing so in itself is marginalizing those voices in Quebec that are affected by this law and stand against it. This legislation has created two spaces in Canada, one where I can enjoy my rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter, and the other where I would have to take off my turban to work in public service. Yet many Canadians are unaware of this. So I would like to thank Councillor Gurpreet for putting forward this motion in front of this council to continue to shed light on this issue. Just as the Canadian Charter guarantees freedoms and rights for all Canadians, a law that attacks these freedoms for some of us should be a concern for all of us. I want to thank the Region of Peel for considering to stand in solidarity with all Canadians. To my friends in Quebec, if you're watching this, I want you to know, people of Brampton, Ontario, people of Victoria, BC, people of Calgary, Alberta, and hopefully people of Peel region are standing beside you as you continue to fight this bill. That is 2.8 million Canadians standing by your side. Thank you.
Thank you, Guru. Next we have Nadia Hassan and Fatima Sajan from the National Council of Canadian Muslims. Welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having us. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we gather here today on the ancestral lands of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabeg, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit. As was mentioned, my name is Nadia Hassan. I'm the Deputy Director of the National Council of Canadian Muslims, and this is my colleague, Fatima Sajan, the Manager of Community Engagement and Development. The purpose of our delegation here today is to support Councillor Dillon's motion in regards to one of the biggest civil rights challenges of our time, and that is the passage into law of Quebec's Bill 21, as my colleagues of the WSO have already mentioned. It was not long ago, really not that long ago, that we fought for the right to marry between races and religion. It wasn't even that long ago that we fought for the women's right to vote. These hard-won battles for civil rights are a fundamental part of our identities as Canadians. However, on June 16th, 2019, just this year, the Quebec government took us a massive step backwards. As many of you already know, the Quebec government has restricted the wearing of religious symbols in several public sector jobs. I want you to let that sink in for a moment. This means that Jews, Sikhs, and Muslims wake up every morning to fewer opportunities than everyone else in Quebec. We have legalized the very thing that we have fought for decades to overcome: discrimination and second-class citizenship. And the thing is that we all bear a collective responsibility for this. The new law in Quebec ensures that Canadians do not come to work with their full selves in their full creativity and richness. Instead of forging forward into the future with our invaluable diversity, this new law creates workplaces that are dysfunctional and hostile, and we're already hearing stories from Muslims, Sikhs, and Jews who are facing incredibly hostile environment. It will create workplaces in which colleagues are supported by the law to snitch on each other for wearing a kippah, a turban, or a hijab. So just imagine that workplace and what that feels like. A place where teachers from religious minorities will feel bullied into changing who they are in order to feel accepted or just to go about doing their jobs. We've already heard of stories of this law having indirect effects, especially in the school system, with teachers feeling emboldened to ask students to remove their turbans and hijabs. And most of all, this new law will take Canada in a dangerous direction. It shows that we're willing to go against the Constitution in order to placate those amongst us who see the world in terms of us versus them. Today, we face criticism from the United Nations for Bill 21. And the world watches as Quebec makes some of our most vulnerable populations even more vulnerable as they stand to lose their jobs for expressing something that they thought would always be free and welcome in Canada. Now let the world watch as we correct this mistake. We need to collectively stand strong against this assault on our civil rights across race, religion, and partisanship. We thank and commend all those leaders, like Councillor DHILLON, who are taking a position that upholds our constitutional rights as Canadians and support our religious and individual freedoms. And we thank everyone who has supported our legal challenge in court in Quebec that we're going to be seeing go to the Court of Appeal later this fall. And we call on all elected officials across Canada to do the same. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We've brought forward item 19.1. Councillor DHILLON, all members of council have the motion. I'll take it as read, but I'll open up the floor to you to introduce.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. So first, I'd like to thank all of those who have come to delegate today. It's clear that this bill has a real impact on the lives of so many. It legalizes discrimination and creates second-class citizenship in this country. And the reason I brought this motion today is simple. As Caledon's, Mississauga's, and Brampton's upper-tier municipality, it's critical for us to stand united with those impacted by Quebec's Bill 21. We've taken tremendous steps with the Peel Police in the city of Brampton, but this motion not only officially puts the region's position in writing, but also will make Peel a leader and part of a growing voice of municipalities across the nation standing against this bill. As a region, we're obligated to fight discrimination as we are signatories and a member of the Canadian Coalition of Municipalities Against Racism and Discrimination, the CCMARD, as is Caledon. Additionally, the City of Calgary recently moved a motion to work with the CCMARD to create a nationwide initiative that addresses the harms of Bill 21 and its impacts to the unity, reputation, and well-being of Canada. And I also want to thank Calgary Councillor George Chahal for his leadership on this. And if there's an appetite and a will of council, we can also choose to assist in the creation of the initiative. This motion also sends a clear message to the federal parties that we want them to take action and not just give us platitudes. I'm going to be very honest as well. As a person who's very visible, I'm so thankful that I live in Brampton, that I live in the region of Peel where we, people don't give you a second look, generally speaking. Do we have more work to do? Absolutely, but we live in a very, very tolerant and accepting municipality and region. Unfortunately, in Quebec, for somebody who looks like me, they've been put in the other category. They can live there, but they just can't have the full rights and privileges of others who they don't blend in with. They can't be a police officer, they can't be a teacher, they can't be a judge, they can't work in any public sector job if they wear a turban, hijab, kippah, or a cross. And this is tough. And I feel for people in Quebec who are affected by this. It was already tough just trying to be a regular Canadian for these people. And I don't think people realize just how tough it is, but it's certainly much tougher for them now. And by adding to the growing number of municipalities across Canada condemning Bill 21, the region of Peel can absolutely do its part to show its support by passing this motion today. And so we'll take it as read. The motion is there, and I'm very glad that Councillor Downey, who's the chair of the DEER committee, has seconded it. I won't get too much into my own experience. I grew up in Windsor and eventually moved to the Toronto area in Malton, and it was like day and night for me. You see people who look like you, but you really don't go through the same things that, well, I didn't go through the same things that I did in Windsor. Playing hockey on the street in Windsor, people would come to our door, get out of our city. And eventually, you know what we did? We got out of their city. Going to school, your friends are playing with you. 1 minute they're your friends, the next minute they're calling you the N-word. The next minute they're calling you a Paki. One of my friends who was growing up in Windsor, his dad would tell him to say things to me. And my dad would tell me, listen, you're different than everybody. You have to act different than everybody. So as an 8, 9, 10-year-old, I'm a representative of Sikhism all of a sudden, because I can't go out there and do certain things or act like a kid, things that a kid would want to do in public, because people would look at Sikhs differently. So it's tough growing up. It's tough being a person of minority background, but we've made so many strides in the country. We've made so many, we've come so far. But what Bill 21 does is move us backwards, and it kind of rekindles a lot of memories for me growing up, just to think about what some of these people are going to have to go through. You work so hard to get educated. You put so much work in, your parents invest so much for you to become, for example, a teacher, like the one board member of WSO did, but unfortunately she had to move to BC. And so what this bill, I'm confident that it will pass today. I hope unanimously. It'll give confidence to our residents of Peel Region that we absolutely do not stand with anybody who is intolerant or promotes discrimination. And so I just want to once again thank our delegates for coming in today. This means a lot. It means a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Dhillon. Councillor Crombie.
Councillor Dhillon, thank you for sharing your story. It's incredible how ignorant some people can be. So to our deputants, Assalamu alaikum, Sat Sri Akal, welcome. You're welcomed here. This is Peel, Mississauga, Caledon, Brampton. You're welcomed here. And as I said earlier, we don't have any tolerance for any intolerance. And so we applaud the Calgary Council for this motion. And I want to thank Councillor Dhillon for bringing this forward. As I had said earlier, we had thought about it as well, but we thought that it was right coming from you. So we are a welcoming, vibrant, inclusive city in Mississauga, and we respect everyone's faith, religion, gender, languages, and culture. And we believe that the wearing of any religious symbol is fundamental and it's an exercise in their freedom of choice, conscience, and religion, and it's protected in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and is incumbent on us to continue to protect our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and that's why we're going to stand up for them today. It's about sharing, protecting our shared values and affirming our commitment to who we are, which is a diverse, equitable city which values tolerance, diversity, inclusion, etc. And whereas forcing citizens to abandon their cultural and religious practices will create an environment which fosters intolerance and inequity. We think that Bill 21 is divisive and will perpetuate exclusion, discrimination, creating class divisions, and increasing the systematic barriers to employment for religious groups. So we applaud organizations like the National Council of Canadian Muslims, Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the World Sikh Organization, and others for the constitutional challenge against Bill 21. We want to continue to be a warm, welcoming, inclusive community, and to that end, I almost think we should take out ads in Quebec saying anyone who is a professional civil servant feels discriminated against, we welcome you here in Peel. Come to Mississauga, we'll help you find employment. So that'll give us a thought. So I'm delighted to support you today, Councillor Dhillon, and I thank you for bringing this forward. This is very important. It's more than symbolic. We have to stand together against this kind of discrimination. It's very important to know that our colleagues, our friends in Quebec are not alone, and it's important for us to take this stand in this position today. We must stand shoulder to shoulder, and we must show them that we won't have any tolerance for any intolerance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Crombie. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Acting Chair, and I too would like to thank the delegates for coming in and speaking to us this morning. My family and I moved here 40 years ago. Love this country, and the reason why I love this country is because of its diversity. This country has provided myself and my family opportunities. Did I ever encounter racism growing up here? Yeah, I did. But really, I looked at those challenges as opportunities, and I've taken my family and I, my sisters, my brother, we've turned those challenges into opportunities. And I was elected in Caledon in 2000. And as most of you know, Caledon is a very Anglo community. But I will tell you, people in Caledon did not see Annette the brown girl. They saw Annette the person. And so I think this bill really has taken us huge steps backwards. We've come a long way recognizing and respecting each other's culture, race, and to go back in time, I think it's really appalling. In fact, I honestly can't believe that this is what we've come to here in this country, but again, we're all standing together, and I think that we need to send a strong message to Quebec that this country is built on diversity. That is what makes us so great. So thank you again, Councillor Dhillon. Thank you for bringing your motion forward, and I'm certainly happy to support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And as I said before, I thank the delegations, and I think all of you have definitely hit the nail on the head where it's going. Bill 21 is unconstitutional. Not only that, is simply put, it's un-Canadian. That's not what we're about. It's personally, it's against the values that I raised my children on, and to me, I think this is why we have to stand up and support it. If I can ask the mover and seconder, if we can just add that we forward this motion towards AMO and FCM as well, because I think we need to lead with this to say we want everybody to get behind this. one gentleman said, you know, we're looking at, what, 2-point-some million? No. What we need to do is stand up as a country to send a message to Quebec through all municipalities. This is unacceptable.
Thompson. Councillor Saito.
Thank you, and thank you to the delegates for being here, and thank you, Councillor Dillon, for bringing this forward. And as you heard, we were going to deal with it yesterday at Council, but we wanted to do it here first with your motion so that we can support that back in Mississauga, which we will be doing. You know, our country has a history of having done this in the past, and it's not a very pleasant history, and it's one that my own family endured. And my husband's is third-generation Japanese. His parents were born in British Columbia. His mother was a school teacher. His father was an engineer, highly educated. And in the 1940s, during the war, they were interred. They lost their homes, they lost all their belongings, their jobs, and they were interred in the center of the country. It took the Canadian government over 40 years to issue an apology to the families that had gone through that. And that was simply because, even though they were born in Canada, they were Canadians, but because they had ties with Japan during a war, that they were no longer considered to be Canadians. And no one should ever, ever have to endure that kind of discrimination and prejudice, whether it's the color of your skin, the religion that you worship, or anything. And I would hope that our country, since that time, has learned what it does to people when that happens. And it's not a good time of our history, and people know it's not a good time in our history. And that's just one example. There have been other examples throughout our history in Canada. This is just another one. It's in a single province, and it's something that we can't be quiet about, because if we are, then we're just repeating history. I want to say, though, that, you know, when I brought up my children, I didn't just tell them to be tolerant, because I think that word is overused, quite frankly. I think what we should be using is acceptance and understanding. And you can be tolerant of something, but if you don't accept it and you don't understand it, then you're just basically paying lip service to it. So I don't use tolerance very often when I speak about discrimination or racialism or anything. I use the acceptance and I use understanding, because that's what we should be promoting with our children, and that's what we should be promoting among ourselves as adults. So, Councillor Dillon, I'm very pleased to support you today, and I want to thank you for bringing this forward. And I certainly hope that as the country gathers together and remembers what has happened in the past, that we move forward and not repeat this in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Saito. Councillor Downey.
Thank you, through you, Acting Chair. Councillor Saito is quite right. Language is very powerful, and I don't think members of a community should simply just be tolerated. In Peel, diversity is a fact, inclusion is a choice. So I'd like to thank all of the delegates for coming today and commend Councillor Dillon for bringing this forward. I'd also like to request a standing vote.
Thank you, Councillor Downey. Councillor Parrish.
Yeah, I wasn't going to speak, but I'm sitting here listening to all this and remembering 30 years ago when I was chair of the Peel Board. The Sikh community wanted to wear a small Kirpan emblem, just like we wear crosses. They wanted to wear this emblem. And the Board of Education went freaky. They said, well, where does it stop? They're going to come in with big swords. They're going to have fights in the halls. There's going to be murder and mayhem. So we took a vote at council, and the only two trustees that voted against the motion of the board, which was, no, you can't wear curb pants, were George and I. And unfortunately, I was chairman of the board, so the Sikh community took the Peel board to the Human Rights Commission. And Gunther Plout was a pretty famous guy, and he was the judge. And I unfortunately had to get up and give testimony. And he said, "What do you think we should do?" I said, "You have to ask me that question twice." He kind of looked at me, and I said, "Ask me as chair of the board, because I have a position I have to maintain, and ask me as a human being." So as chair of the board, which lasted exactly 1 week after I did this, I answered that the Peel board position was no curb pens in any size, shape, or form in the schools. And he said, "Well, what would you do as a human being?" I said, "It's ludicrous." I said, "That's absolutely no danger to anybody. And if you are going to ban religious symbols, you ban them for everybody, or you ban them for no one." So we had a back and forth conversation. He ended up taking exactly what I said, and that was his ruling. So the following week, I got dumped as chairman of the board, but I mean, I've been thrown out of better places. But it's the story's there just to remind everybody that 30 years ago, we weren't perfect, and we've come a long way. And we can't slip. We can't let even another part of our country slip. It's embarrassing for all of us. So thank you for bringing the motion forward. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Parrish. Councillor Medeiros.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, again, thank you, Councillor DHILLON. And I could say at Brampton Council, when we discussed this and we put forth our motion and really recognize the leadership of our Mayor, Patrick Brown, you know, one of the discussion points was around looking internally at our organization. Are we doing everything? You know, symbolism aside, you know, I think everyone, you know, the praise and we understand the importance, but we have to put the proof in the pudding, and we have to really stand behind ensuring that, for example, the IHR practices and policies, that we have an organization that reflects the community we serve. You know, so as much as, you know, we appreciate all this, but we still have to look internally at our organizations and in our society and ensure that boards are reflective, ensure that we're keeping on this issue, and it's not just symbolism. I remember years ago when I first got elected, the idea of diversity for some of my colleagues, or we would go to events and so on, and you tried their food and you would pat them on the back and take a picture. But yet when it came to funding, when it came to actual putting your money where your mouth is, that support wasn't there. So I say this just as a reminder that we have to be vigilant and ensure that we remain vigilant and look internally as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. Councillor Dillon, wrap it up.
So I just want to thank everybody for the great discussion we've had, and just to respond to Councillor Medeiros, just for the information of everybody at this table, we did pass a motion in Brampton, but we also have a diversity survey that's being done. It's going to be brought back at the end of October, and for the information of this council, we'll be sure to update everybody on the results of that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Dillon. So it's truly an honor for me to sit here today, having gone through this at the City of Brampton and now at the Region of Peel. A recorded vote has been requested, standing as a symbol to our brothers and sisters of the Northeast, Quebec. And so there's just one little hiccup with this. As you stand, I request that you push the button. I know it's very complicated, George, but it doesn't have to be at the same time, but let's go ahead and I'll push the button now.
There we go.
All those in favor? Councillor Carlson, Mayor Crombie, Councillor Demurla, Councillor Dasco, Councillor Dillon, Councillor Downey, Councillor Fonseca, Councillor Groves, Councillor Innes, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Mahoney, Councillor McFadden, Councillor Medeiros, Councillor Parrish, Councillor Raz, Councillor SAITO, Councillor Sinclair, Councillor Starr, Mayor Thompson, Councillor Vicente, and Councillor PALLESCHI. It's unanimous.
Thank you very much. On to staff presentations. Our first staff presentation is item 7.1, corporate risk profile related to 14.4. This was referred from the September 19th, 2019 Audit and Risk Committee meeting. Presentation by Michelle Morris, Director, Enterprise Risk and Audit Services, and Anila Lalani. You're going to have to correct me on that one. Advisor, Enterprise Risk Management.
Good morning, Chair and members. I was going to say Audit and Risk Committee, but members of Council. So my name is Michelle Morris. I'm the Director of Enterprise Risk Management, and with me is Anila Leilani, and she's the Advisor of Enterprise Risk Management. Do you want to advance? So organizations that proactively manage risk may improve organizational performance. And Nilla and I are here today to talk to you about the Region of Peel's corporate risk profile. Though the region has always managed risk, the development of the corporate risk profile enables the region to review risks from a strategic lens and can assist in answering, are we managing the right risks? Are we doing enough? Are we doing too much? Or are we on the right track? The true value of the corporate risk profile is in its development, where the questions I just asked can begin to be answered. So today's agenda includes the corporate risk profile and corporate risk defined, the region's corporate risk profile, the usage of the profile, a little discussion on the risks that have been realized over the past year, climate change interconnectivity risks, next steps, and questions that you may have. So the corporate risk profile is simply a communication tool that identifies both internal and external risk facing an organization. It is also a key output of the enterprise risk management process. And we have defined a corporate risk is that it's an uncertain event that can cause significant negative impact on an organization due to either an internal or external risk and may impact the organization's ability to deliver on its strategic outcomes and or may erode trust and confidence of our stakeholders.
15 corporate risks are identified in the region's corporate risk profile. If any of these risks materialized, it may impact the region's ability to achieve its strategic outcomes. These risks fall in 3 broad categories: strategic risk, operational risk, and reputational risk. Some of these are external risk where region may have little ability to reduce the likelihood from occurring, but may be able to reduce the impact. Some of these risks are internal risks where region may be able to control the likelihood and reduce the impact by implementing adequate mitigation plans. Included in the profile are the mitigation plans, also called controls, that management have put in place or are in a process of developing those plans. Referring to Table 4 on page 7.1-13, these controls have been color-coded in the profile. The green color indicates that controls exist to mitigate the risk. Yellow indicates the management is in a process of developing controls to address the risk, and the shading indicates that management may have little ability to manage those external risks, but management will continue to monitor them and implement strategies to manage or minimize risk exposure. Now, the question is, what do we do with this risk information? It may be used as a key input into strategic planning. It may assist the council and the leadership team in identifying strategies to deliver on the term of council priorities and various opportunities to consider and the risks associated with different strategic options. It may validate areas for risk-taking. Identifying areas and tactics where risk-taking may help maximize benefits. Consideration should be given to both selection of tactics and the risks involved. It may validate where risk-taking can provide the best value. It allows risk-informed decision-making when events that can cause disruption are identified and actions are taken to reduce the likelihood of those events, limit the damage, and contain the cost. It may allow the organization to maintain a balance between value, cost, and risk. The value being pursued, for example, community benefit. The risk involved in pursuing and the cost associated with managing the risk. Please note that the first bullet should read social cohesion and intolerance. Some risks manifested during the year and may have significant impacts on regions' ability to achieve the strategic outcomes in the timeline projected. The risk of social cohesion and intolerance has manifested last year. The 2018 annual hate-motivated crime report from the Peel Police noted 107 criminal code offenses identified as hate crimes, and there is year-over-year increase noted Canada-wide. There are uncertainties surrounding the provincial announcements regarding the regional review, changes to policies, and funding to the region. Similar to all organizations, the region continues to experience increased cyber attacks attempts and phishing attempts. Enterprise risk and audit services continue to work with the service managers to identify risks that manifest during the year and include them in the profile. Climate change risk as identified by the World Economic Forum in terms of likelihood and impact continue to dominate the global risk profile. It is worth noting that 5 of the top 10 risks in terms of likelihood and impact are environmental risks, specifically around the failure of climate change mitigation and adaptation. Risks are not isolated. It has impacts on business outcomes and other risks. This year, an interconnectivity analysis of climate change risk to the other 14 corporate risks was conducted by the Office of Climate Change and Energy Management. This analysis allows the region to understand how climate change risk may amplify the impact of other 14 risks identified in the corporate risk profile.
Enterprise risk and audit services will continue to work with management to monitor and update the corporate risk profile. We will continue to work with the strategic planning group to help ensure the corporate risk profile is used as an input into the term of council priorities decision-making processes. And as stated earlier, organizations that proactively manage risk may be able to improve organizational performance. We thank you, and we now open it up for any questions or comments that you may have.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brass.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to Anila and Michelle for coming today and presenting. I think I may have requested that you come to the full council just to discuss the types of risks that we're looking at as an organization. Maybe within the next few weeks, the regional governance and policies from the provincial government may rank a little bit higher, but we'll see. Or it may completely fall off the charts, who knows? But one other thing is, it's good to know that we have that overall risk overview for all of our lines of business, especially as it relates to climate change, because that is something that, 15 years ago, although it was something that was generally talked about, we didn't see the day-to-day or the month-to-month changes to businesses, and now we're seeing that in ours and in others. High water levels, flooding, and other types of weather-related events like ice storms are impacting our business, and it's not a once every 100 years; it's several times a year in some cases. So I do appreciate you coming today and giving us an update on our risk profile. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ross. Councillor Starr.
Yeah, thank you again. Some of us heard this presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you again for presenting. Some of us heard this presentation before, and I think that's why it ended up here, as you know, so that everybody could realize how important this area is. And I think, as mentioned by Councillor Rass, 20, 30, 40 years ago, corporate risk was, is the sidewalk cracked? Oh, there's a pothole, and or maybe there's other complaints. Now it encompasses a lot more. And still, those other minor ones are still there, which have to be recognized. But now we have to recognize, I think, the social impacts and the climate change and that's what it's about now. And I'm so pleased that there is a corporate risk area that does take into account all these areas, and I'm also pleased to see that there will be some sort of an annual update as to what we're doing, monitoring where we were and where we're going, because corporate risk affects all of us, and it still goes back even to the cracked sidewalk and pothole, and it's all up to all of us, even as administrators of municipalities, to make sure that we all are part of it. So thanks very much, and look forward to updates.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Starr. So members, item 7.1, the Region Appeals Corporate Risk Profile as described in the report of the Director, Enterprise Risk and Audit Services titled Corporate Risk Profile be endorsed. Been moved by Councillor Raz, seconded by Councillor Starr, and it's a recorded vote. That carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have item 7.2, establishing a Treasury Risk Appetite Framework. This is related to 14.4, and we will bring forward 14.1. This was referred from the September 19th, 2019 Audit and Risk Committee meeting. This presentation by Julie, Director of Treasury Services. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Regional Chair, members of Council, thank you for your time today. On September 19th, as we've heard, this presentation was discussed in detail with the Audit and Risk Committee. Today, I will provide the key highlights of the recommended Treasury Risk Appetite Framework, as well as an update on the cash management strategy approved in the spring of 2017. The established governance structure sets out the controls in place to monitor and manage risks related to the region's investment portfolio and debt program. Built within the governance structure are 3 lines of defense, which provide the controls within the organization to ensure that risks are being identified, monitored, and managed. This governance structure is consistent with best practices within the investment and treasury industries. At the start of 2019, the Treasury Oversight Committee, an internal management committee, was established to strengthen the current governance structure by providing more frequent oversight of the Treasury activities and advise on risk management and policy changes. The committee is chaired by the Treasurer and Director of Corporate Finance, who has statutory obligations related to debt and investments. The other members are comprised of the Director of Business and Financial Planning to support the alignment with budgeting and long-term planning initiatives, the Commissioner of Human Services, representing Peel Housing Corporation, as Treasury manages both investments and supports their borrowing program. The Interim Commissioner of Public Works, representing the region's most capital-intensive department within the region. Senior Legal Counsel acts as advisor to the committee as well. Treasury is focused on three main objectives: manage risk to limit financial exposure and ensure long-term flexibility while adhering to regulatory and policy requirements, maintain liquidity to meet our financial obligations, and achieve objectives relative to risk. These objectives support our outcomes of optimizing investment returns relative to risk and reducing the long-term cost of borrowing at the region. The objective of setting the risk appetite is to help us set boundaries for risk-taking, ensuring we work within our scope of authority. Most importantly, it provides guidance in decision-making and helps us prioritize the most important risks. The Treasury Risk Appetite Framework fits within the Council-approved Regional Risk Appetite Framework, and we are proposing a moderate risk appetite consistent with the region's corporate risk appetite for financial risk, which you can see up on the screen in the center of the table. Within the Treasury Risk Appetite Framework, there remains a low appetite for reputational, compliance, regulatory, and operational risks consistent with the region's risk appetite. While the level of financial risk will change over time due to market and organizational considerations, the maximum risk will remain in line with the region's moderate financial risk appetite. We actively monitor and manage risk to ensure it is appropriately rewarded. While there are several risks we actively monitor and manage, I will address some of the key financial risks in more detail. Liquidity is the ability to access cash on short-term notice with limited cost. For example, money held in your savings account can be accessed immediately with no cost. However, real estate, such as your home, is more difficult to convert to cash immediately. Liquidity risk is monitored daily, and it is managed by maintaining sufficient cash balances and short-term liquid investments to meet the financial obligations of the region. Concentration risk is when a portfolio is overexposed to one particular security, industry, or counterparty. For example, if your portfolio consisted of only one stock and there was an adverse event impacting that stock, your risk of loss would be extremely high. Diversification of our portfolio enables us to reduce this risk. The region is exposed to market risk through three main risks: credit risk, interest rate risk, and equity risk. We leverage the region's integrated planning framework and the long-term financial planning strategy to better understand the long-term needs of the region. Understanding the timing of future expenditures enables Treasury to strategically invest the assets and align maturities to the cash needs of the region, minimizing the risk of loss. It may also provide flexibility to borrow strategically and minimize the overall cost of borrowing. The governance framework provides an efficient, controlled environment within which the risks are monitored and managed. A clear Treasury risk appetite framework sets the parameters around which we are permitted to take risk to meet our objectives of maximizing investment returns and lowering the cost of borrowing. Risk tolerance utilizes the risk appetite to set limits and ranges where possible. The approval of the investment goals and policies, also before Council today, sets the limits and ranges governing the investment portfolio. The policy revisions now permit full flexibility within the Municipal Act, consistent with the recommendations of the cash management strategy in 2017. It is important to note that the permitted investments remain well within a moderate risk appetite. To summarize, shifting to a moderate risk appetite is not only consistent with the region's corporate risk appetite and recommendations of the cash management strategy, but supports the long-term sustainability of the region. In closing, I would like to share with you some of the achievements of the cash management strategy. As I mentioned earlier, the Treasury Risk Oversight Committee was established earlier this year to strengthen both our governance and risk management practices internally. We have implemented stronger controls through segregation of duties. We have employed more efficient liquidity management practices, generating additional financial returns on the region's cash balances. We also expect to realize approximately $6 to $6.5 million in additional financial returns by year-end by more actively managing the investment portfolio. These additional returns benefit the reserves and help offset the infrastructure funding gap. Finally, we continue to realize operational efficiencies and expect cost savings of approximately $8,000 by year-end. Thank you for your time, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Julie. We have Councillor Raz.
Why do you laugh? Thank you, Julie, for the presentation. And at this moment, I'm going to give a shout out to Stephen Van Offwigen, who around this time last year, perhaps we were looking, or before that, we were looking at hiring personnel to more actively manage our cash and our and some of our investments. And by doing that, we're going to be achieving over $6 million that we hadn't initially expected. So congratulations, where congratulations is due. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Raz. Councillor Starr.
The 1-2 team. Anyway, I just want to say congratulations on great work. I think we said that at the committee, and by involving, I think, in the management committee, you get the whole corporate team involved, knowing what's going on, and more importantly, you're saving money, and the reputation of this of this committee or the cash management area is number one. I think it's probably number one in the province, and the returns are great. So I'm not going to say any more. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie, for the presentation. We're going to put item 14.1 and 7.2 together, taken as read, moved by Councillor Starr, seconded by Councillor Raz, all in recorded vote. We're good. Next, we have item 7.3 is a brief presentation from Suzanne Finn for Here for Information. It's an update on the implementation of the service delivery model. Suzanne?
Good morning, Chair, members of Council. My name is Suzanne Finn, the Director of Early Years and Child Care Services with the region. Joining me today is Nikima Palmer, Manager of System Planning for Early Years and Child Care. In October 2017, Regional Council challenged staff to develop a new service delivery model for Peel, which would respond to the needs of residents by ensuring equitable access to early on programs for all families. In May 2018, Council approved the new service delivery model. Today, we applaud Council for its commitment to families, and we're pleased to provide you with an update on the service delivery model and enhancements we've made to the early on centers due to the regional investment. The region, as a service system manager, is responsible for funding, planning, management of early on child and family centers. Early on centers are very different from licensed child care centers. They support the needs of the whole family. Early ons are free, drop-in programs for families with children aged 6 and under. The region works in collaboration with 7 nonprofit service providers who directly deliver these programs, some of which are in the audience today. Early ons directly contribute to the region's overall vision of community for life by supporting all children to achieve their mental and physical potential. In May 2018, Council approved the expansion of the Early On as a regional priority. This new service delivery model requires an annual regional investment totaling $3.4 million over 4 years. The new service delivery model was designed to improve access to families to qualified professionals in early child development, to improve the experience of families attending early on programs, and to stabilize the system by addressing historical inequity in funding and program access. Peel's population of children from birth to 6 years of age is projected to grow 13% from 2019 to 2026. This model is flexible to respond to the child population growth as well as other demographic changes in Peel. And now I'm pleased to turn it over to Nikema to share with you about the early on experience for families and what we've achieved this past year.
Thank you, Suzanne. Attendance at early on programs create positive outcomes for families. School principals report that children who attend early on programs are more self-regulated and easily transition to the school environment. Families with unique needs gain access to customized programs such as workshops and support groups. Peel's Early On Special Needs Resourcing Model was developed in response to the needs of families and early on program staff. This support is unique to Peel, where resource consultants assist families in answering questions about their child's development and referring them to the specialized services they need. Resource consultants also support early on program staff in ensuring that all programs are welcoming and inclusive of the diverse communities they serve. Investments to enhance programs ensure that families spend quality time in quality environments. Families have a sense of belonging and connect with other families and services in their communities. And new families gain access to the tools they need to support their children to achieve mental and their physical potential. On January 1st, 2019, with regional investment of $1.53 million, the Early On Service Delivery Model was implemented. This investment has led to a number of achievements this year. 162 new program hours per week have been added in communities that previously had little or no services. Families now have access to year-round services and more flexibility to choose early on times and locations that work for them. By year-end, 9 new early on centers will open, and up to 95,000 families will be supported. In an effort to increase awareness and reach underrepresented groups, such as new residents in Peel and low-income families, outreach staff will attend over 250 community events by year-end as part of an early on awareness campaign. Families will gain access to 225 hours per week in special needs supports starting this month. Service providers will continue to leverage local partnerships to offer over 400 customized program sessions this year, including postpartum support groups, digital literacy workshops, school readiness programs, and eco-friendly initiatives. A significant barrier for families is a lack of awareness of early on programs and locations. To help address this barrier, regional staff have been working closely with our service providers to feature early on in local media outlets, on social media, and through improved signage visibility. We have also engaged local, regional, and provincial officials, including some of you in the room today, to attend early on events in our communities and to spread the word among residents. Now, we are very pleased to share with you a sneak preview of the following video, which will be officially launched following today's presentation. Video. Sorry, we're having... It's not going on.
That's okay, we'll get the video queued up here. I think we're working on it. In the meantime, I'm going to go over to Councillor Medeiros.
Oh.
Councillor Medeiros?
Thank you, Acting Chair. Thank you for the presentation. And I know you did touch upon your presentation, the differences between the licensed child care centers and the early on centers. I know myself, sometimes you notice it in the media. I myself sometimes trying to explain to constituents, and I think just to overall understanding. Can you just highlight again the differences for us?
Through the chair. So early on programs are very different from licensed childcare in that they're free. They're drop-in programs. The parent is required to stay with the child, and there's an opportunity for early on staff to work directly with parents to support them with questions they might have and to deliver our core mandatory services, which includes supporting child development, referring and connecting families to community services. So unlike childcare where the parent does not stay with the child, the parent is required to stay and there is no fee for the service.
Thank you, Councillor Medeiros. There was a few more slides. Do you want to go through some more questions and then the video, then the slides, or how would you like to?
We can go, we can go through the questions and then come back to the video if they can find it.
Perfect. Councillor Downey.
Thank you. I actually don't have any questions. I've been following this quite closely as a...
Thank you, Councillor SAITO.
As a mom, I spent a lot of time at the Early Years Center. Actually, I recall touring the centers with Councillor Medeiros, and it was the first time he had visited one, and probably the millionth time I'd been in an Early Years Center. I think they are so vitally important to our community, and I just want to applaud you. You mentioned as you started, you were applauding us for our commitment to it, but I applaud you and your team for all the work that you've put forward. Building the community starts at that foundation, and I think as we look at different issues that are challenging our community in youth violence and crime and all of these things, it starts somewhere, right? Like we have to build our foundations, and that starts with healthy families and education. And I think about how challenging it is to be a parent day in and day out, and finding access to different supports for children with even just mild special needs, or education support. I know in my family, 2 out of 4 we're looking at psych ed assessments and different school things and IEPs, and that's challenging as a parent. And then I think about how challenging that would be for a newcomer to our community who has a language barrier, or isn't always maybe not as well off, or having challenges finding the extra dollars in their monthly budget to pay for those things. So I just want to say thank you for that, because I think it's so vitally important, and we have to help our families and we have to help the children. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Downey. Councillor SAITO.
Thank you, and thank you, and especially you, Suzanne, for working with us to make sure that the early on centers were in my ward, and in Councillor Mahoney and I had, as you know, had some issues with the schools not basically kicking it out. At that time when I met with the parents who were really afraid of being displaced, it really showed me how much they depended on the center. And it wasn't even just the location, but when they spoke of the teachers at the center and how important it was to them and their children, and also the socializing that the parents had. They had become a very close-knit group and very supportive of each other, meeting other parents. It was a side effect, but a very important one. With the school boards, with the reduction in funding and the school boards increasing rental rates for a lot of the programs in the schools that have become unaffordable for for many groups. How is that affecting our early on centers that are located in the schools?
Through the chair, we have different agreements with different school boards, but currently it's not impacting us directly.
So you're basically saying you're going to defer additional funding for 2020. So if it does start to impact, is this something that can be absorbed if you don't get the additional funding for next year?
Through the chair, the funding that we're asking for is to realign $1 million of efficiencies that we found from other regional programs into it, and then the $400,000 that we're deferring is because of some of the openings have been delayed due to capital build, so we will be fine. We have agreements with both school boards around their leases.
How long are the agreements for?
So the agreement will go until the end of the school year, and then it could be renegotiated in September.
And that's my concern. You know, if it goes to the end of the school year and it's renegotiated for September 2020, and they increase the fees as they have done this year with groups that maybe didn't have an agreement, they were quite significant increases. So have you looked at that and with any anticipation of how we could, you know, can that be managed?
So through the chair, we work closely with the Peel Board, and the Peel Board charges us very minimal rents for the early-ons, and we're only in the Dufferin Peel Board lightly. So if they do come and we'll negotiate with them, we'll come back to council if anything arises.
Okay, thank you. It's a great program, and you know, I think my residents have benefited from it for years, so I'm very pleased that it has expanded to the entire region and the other municipalities are able to enjoy the same services.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Saito. So we have, I'm not sure if we've queued up the video yet, but if you can continue with the slides.
In 2020, with council support, staff will continue to implement system enhancements as previously approved by Regional Council. Regional investments in 2020 will result in the addition of 168 new program hours per week in communities across Peel, with 10 additional early-on centres opening in newly developed and underserved communities. All early-ons will provide families with access to special needs resources and supports. Efforts will continue to build and increase awareness of early-on, particularly with underrepresented groups. In addition, service providers will be supported to continue to deliver customized programs that meet the local needs of our diverse communities.
Thank you, Nikema. By 2022, we'll have nearly doubled the total number of early-on program hours per week. This will help us achieve our goal of creating greater access to early-on programs for family, regardless of where they live in Peel. It would only been possible with Council's ongoing commitment and support of the early-on centres. The last time we came to Council, we committed to finding internal efficiencies to financially support ongoing early-on enhancements, and we've done this. Through the 2020 budget process, staff will reallocate $1 million of existing regional funding found through efficiencies to support early-on system enhancements in 2020. This will result in no net impact to the early growth and development budget. We thank Council for making early-on expansion a priority. Evidence shows that benefits of high-quality early years programs far outweighs the cost. For every dollar spent on learning, the investment nearly triples, and potentially more than $10 return on investment for children. By investing in early-on programs, you're supporting the healthy development of children by giving them the best possible start. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it doesn't look like we're going to be able to show the video, but if you could maybe possibly send it to members of council so that we can get it out. Greatly appreciated. It's been moved by Councillor Downey, seconded by Councillor Saito. Receipt of the report. All in favor, show of hands. Thank you very much. That carries. Our next is moving over to health. I move the chair over to Councillor Downey. Chair Downey.
Thank you. And our first item is 8.1. Public Health Transformation Update. Dr. Hopkins.
Thank you. We've brought this report along with the Cutsert Health Program as well as the 18.1 update. We wanted to provide them together because there's been some new information that has just come out. So I'm going to walk you through the new information, and then I can certainly answer questions about that in any of the reports. So on October 4th, Ministry of Health staff provided updates on public health funding assumptions for 2020. And these updates were provided verbally. We've been told we're not going to get any written confirmation until after the provincial budget is approved in spring of 2020. So to remind you of what we knew previously, effective January 1st, the cost share for public health will shift to 70% provincial and 30% municipal for both our currently cost-shared programs as well as our 100% provincially funded programs, with the exception of the new Ontario Senior Dental Care Program, which will remain 100% provincially funded. In terms of the new information that we got from that call with the province, they've let us know that Peel Public Health should plan to receive the same amount of provincial funding in 2020 as it did in 2018 and 2019, and that we would not be eligible for any of the one-time funding with the change in cost share, as that will only be provided to municipalities that will see more than a 10% increase on the tax levy. The Minister of Health also recommitted to consulting with municipalities and public health, and this includes looking at the previously announced 10% back office efficiencies and the shift to 60-40 cost sharing in 2021. So those are not just moving ahead, they will be part of the consultation process. Now, in terms of new announcements, last evening, the media started reporting, and this morning it was confirmed by the province that the special advisor has been confirmed. So this is the special advisor who will consult with municipal governments, public health, and emergency services to strengthen and modernize public health and emergency health services. The person who will undertake this role is Jim Pine. He is currently the CAO of the County of Hastings. He has a long history in municipal government and has previously worked for the province as well. The media has reported that his contract is 12 months with potential for a 6-month extension beyond that. So we're looking at probably somewhere in the range of a 12 to 18-month time period before a report will go back to the minister. So in terms of what we need to think about here at the Region of Peel, with respect to funding, it's certainly welcome news that Peel Public Health's funding is not going to be decreased, but I know all of you, Council is aware that this does not account for growth or for inflation, so there will continue to be additional pressures here, and this is consistent with the information that was provided to you on September 26th. With respect to the transition of Peel Public Health to a new regional public health entity, given the timeline required for consultation and introduction of legislation, it is very unlikely that this transition could occur on April 1st, 2020, which was the original date the province had announced. With respect to advocacy, Regional Council will have an opportunity to advocate through the upcoming consultation process. And as a result of the advisor just being announced, there were recommendations presented in the report on the Cuts Hurt Health campaign, but staff would suggest that we actually pause on the Cuts Hurt Health campaign at this point in time until we get more information from the advisor about the consultation process and the opportunities that you will have to engage him through that process. And we can certainly bring the campaign back to you at a future point in time should the need arise. That's all of my update, and I'm happy to take questions.
Did you have a question? Mayor Thompson.
Yes, I can say at EMO, we're finding the same thing, that the province is putting a hold on everything, and they want to consult and work with us. So to me, this is a good thing. So let's not slap them in the face yet. Let's see where we go first before we have to act. So no, I agree, and from what I understand, it's pretty concise around the province that they're reaching out to all municipalities with the same thing.
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. I have no questions on the board. I have one, a comment question regarding our communication with the municipalities that are our suggested combination. And I'm wondering if there's been communication with their MOH as well as potentially their chairs of health or upper levels of government, I suppose.
So through the chair, yes, I do speak regularly with the other medical officers of health in Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, Guelph, and Halton region, which are the other 3 municipalities which were proposed. These conversations are very high level and we are not actively engaged in any planning, but we do feel it's important to provide consistent information to our staff as well as to our boards of health to ensure they're all receiving the same information about the potential changes. I do think it's important to note that in the media last evening, Christine Elliott was quoted as saying the boundaries are up for discussion, and I think that this is a very positive announcement based on Regional Council's position that Peel Public Health remain independent.
Absolutely, thank you. I think it was the same message at the Alpha Conference from the Provincial Officer of Health as well, so there's some hope in that. Thank you. And can I get a show of hands to receive 8.1? And a recorded vote on 14.2. Carries. And receipt of 18.1 correspondence from Provincial Public Health Modernization Updates. Good.
Thank you, Chair Downey. Now, Councillor Downey. We move over to items related to human services. Councillor Medeiros, item 10.1 was held by Councillor SAITO.
Thank you, Chair. As suggested by our acting chair, Councillor SAITO, you had some questions?
Yes, thank you. This is the Affordable Transit Program. A couple of questions. So maybe, who's going to clarify it? Sorry, Janice. Is there a risk by limiting access that there will be people who need the service to get to work, et cetera, that will not be able to participate? And what are we going to do if we approve this and then you get into 2020 and the Brampton seniors fare doesn't, it'll reduce the seniors using it, but it won't, it may not reduce the others that are in need?
Through the chair, and thank you for the question. In this particular program, the demand does exceed the supply and will continue to do so. So yes, there is a risk that there will be individuals who need this pass for their activities of daily living that are unable to purchase it. In terms of your Brampton question,
It wasn't really a question. It was actually you answered it with the with your first answer. So that was just an example. We have another program in Mississauga, and I'd raised this question at our budget meeting. We give 50%, we allow the food banks to purchase tickets for food bank clients at 50% off the transit fare rate. And these are residents who are in need. They're using the food bank and quite likely might qualify for this program. I had asked our staff, because they're the only printed tickets that we do, and I guess I'm thinking of the dignity of people being the only ones that are getting on the bus using a ticket, and everyone else is using Presto or cash, which I don't think helps people's self-esteem. And I'd like to see us moving away from the tickets onto a Presto system, which we use here. But I guess I'm wondering if, I don't know if we have overlap with the tickets that the food banks in Mississauga are giving out and the Presto cards that we're giving here. So I guess it's more of a direction, and I'd asked our staff at the city to do the same thing. Is this something that we could take a look at, perhaps sit down with Mississauga staff, looking at how we're handling the transit access with the food banks to see if it could be rolled into this program in some way? And that way we could be using the Presto cards.
Through the chair. So We have not, in fact, cross-referenced who is using the tickets at the food bank with who is using the Affordable Transit Pass, so we could potentially look into that. I think this is another example where we are constrained by the Presto technology. So were we to try to move away from paper tickets to Presto technology for individuals that may only be riding the bus once a month, it's very expensive technology to use in that way. But our transit authority partners are here today, and we have been having a discussion about that, and we will certainly look into it.
Okay, oh yeah, sorry, Joff, I didn't see you up there. And our staff had advised that, I know Presto is working on coming out with single fare cards, which I'm not sure how that will work or how long it would take, but I'd just like to see, we have the same program or similar program at 50% cost, and it, as we have here, and I know it's a different administration process, but if we could possibly work together to see if there's some way that we can meld those systems, maybe have another, when we did the ones for the food bank, a couple of us on council sat down with the food bank representatives and staff, our My Way staff, and worked out a process that we could provide the 50%. So maybe we need to include regional staff, have another session with some of the food banks that are using the tickets, because not all of them do, and see if there's some way we could do some consolidation.
If I could just speak to that through the chair. I think the stumbling block here is that the intent of the programs are different. So we also use bus tickets for our own Ontario Works clients if they need to get to an appointment or to a food bank. So a similar process as being used in Mississauga. The intent of this program is more for people who will use a monthly pass.
All the time.
But certainly we can have those discussions and see if there are ways to streamline our two processes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read the report and noted that the region does not recommend changing the eligibility criteria or reducing the subsidy. So if we're being asked to increase the budget, which is consistent with how the Region Appeal wants to see us supporting people who need these services and who depend on them, you're looking at already an increase of 60% more than what we had originally budgeted. So if we're approving this 600,000 increase today, that still may not be enough, correct?
Through the chair, that's correct.
And so if we hit that hard cap this year, what will you do?
So through the chair, that is dependent on council's direction. So we are coming forward with a recommendation, as you said, that does not relate to income levels or eligibility, because this program is specifically targeted towards working poor and individuals making minimum wage, so we wouldn't want to reduce the subsidy. So we will cap applications when we foresee that we are going to go over or be overspent on this program. And we will report back to council through the triennial process exactly where we forecast being spent.
And where would the 600,000 for this year come from?
The $600,000 for this year is available through regional surpluses. So we have it within the budget to offset this overspending.
Okay, because I think most of us would be concerned about us reaching that cap, say, through mid-November, and then we're basically telling folks who may be at the very low end of the scale in terms of being able to qualify that, no, you can't apply. And so I trust your numbers, but we all admit that we may exceed those numbers even in this year. And if it would be the will of council to increase that budget, perhaps to $2 million for this year, then I think that that's something we should move.
Through the chair, I will take my direction from council. I would just emphasize that we will always find ourselves in a position with this program where supply supply does not meet demand.
So I'd be happy to move that the upper limit for this year be set this year for 2 million. And then we look forward to staff's reports in the future to see what the numbers can be. Once you have more data, et cetera, to fund this program through the remaining balance of this year.
So I guess before that, I see Stephen is on the board. Please, if you can weigh in.
Through the chair, thank you. Just to be clear for council, the recommendation is that we begin capping in the next fiscal year. We anticipate we will be overspending this year, which will be handled through surplus management. So there is no intention to cap in 2020. Then as part of the 2020 budget process that council will undertake next month, we then look at what is the appropriate budget. Staff have recommended an increase of $600,000 to that budget. And staff are also recommending that in 2020, should council approve the recommendation that's before you, that we'd also have a cap at that point in time. If council prefers not to have a cap, council can choose to amend the recommendation that's before you right now. That'll then allow for how we run most of our programs. Some of our programs like TransHelp are not capped. Some of our other programs like Seniors Dental is a cap program. That really is a choice of council. Do you want a cap, or do you want us to deal with any in-year variances as we would do with other programs through regular surplus management?
So thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So the recommendation requests a budget increase of $600,000, and you're saying that if the intake or the number of applications were to exceed that budgeted amount, we could, if council were to decide, ask that a cap not be imposed. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, and so through you, Mr. Chair, I would move for that to be added to the recommendations on this report.
Through the chair, if I may, that would require removing the second recommendation that's before you. Right now, the second recommendation is to implement a capping program next year. So I think what you're suggesting is to remove that recommendation.
Correct.
I guess to our regional clerk, do you need time to put that in writing? Or
if it's just deleting the second paragraph.
Oh, is that what we're doing?
So
Okay.
that would be an amendment, and we would vote on the amendment first. If the amendment passes, then it's concluded. If the amendment does not pass, then you go back to the original motion.
Okay. So I guess speaking to the amendment now. Councillor SAITO?
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm a little confused because I fully agree with Councillor Vicente. The report said that there's a forecast deficit of 800,000, and you're asking to put 600,000 in the next budget. Is the 600,000 based on the capping? If we weren't capping, would it be 800,000?
So through the chair, yes. This year, we anticipate, without capping the program, that we will be in the area of $800,000 overspent.
Okay.
Under the 2020 budget deliberations, council may be asked to consider an increase of 600,000. We believe that we will be in that range next year, but only if we cap the intake of new applications.
Okay. I would like to see, when it comes to budget, I would like to see a, and I want to call it a business case, because there is a business case for these subsidies. We've always shown in the past that when we increased daycare, it enabled our contributions to daycare subsidy, that it allowed people to go to work. And many times it got them off Ontario Works because they were able to support their families. I think this transit program has potential for doing the same thing. So I would like to see, when it comes to budget, some rationale for, I know we had it when we went in the program. I don't use the word rationale because I fully support this program and promote it for it when we brought it forward. But I'd like to see, for budget purposes, for every dollar that we spend on this, where potentially are we also saving money on other services? And I'd like to see you come back with two scenarios: the 600,000 that you're that you're proposing today and the 800,000 that you feel you're going to be short this year without capping. So I'd like to see in the 2020 budget a report on how it impacts the overall regional budget for 2020 with capping and without capping. So I think we're kind of looking at 600 or 800,000. And I think at that time, we can then make a decision which way we want to go. So I'm a little reluctant to make that, to support that recommendation today to go forward with capping until we get into budget and discuss it more in more detail. So I would suggest, Councillor Vicente, I know you amended the motion, but could I ask that perhaps we further amend the motion to deal with this in more detail in a report at budget and not make the decision today and ask staff to come back with options?
Okay, thank you. I'll go to Councillor Raz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I guess I have similar concerns. There are so many worthy programs that we're doing, and to not put caps on many of our programs, we're already scheduling a larger budget increase than we originally anticipated, above our 2.9%. So I think until we know where we're going to land, by having an uncapped program that we know is going to be at a minimum 1.6 million, I don't think that's a fiscally responsible thing to do right now. We need to see the bigger picture and where we're going to be landing, not just 2020, but we know that some of the changes coming provincially in 2021 and in 2022, there's going to be bigger shoes to drop. So in the interest of being fiscally responsible here, I don't support not having a cap on a program until we can get a better handle on all of the other challenges and areas where we are now going to be responsible for a greater load of the cost sharing from the province. So I can't support the no cap piece.
Okay.
So I'm comfortable with the original recommendation.
Councillor Vicente.
Thank you, Councillor. I thought I heard staff say that if things proceed as they are going now, we will reach our numbers sometime before the end of the year. But I also heard staff say that we would handle that scenario by accessing reserve funds. Is that correct? So then the question is would we be cutting off people before the end of the year, or would we not be cutting off people before the end of the year?
So through the chair, I apologize for the confusion in the report. For 2019, we will not be capping, we will not be cutting people off. We have done a forecast based on the number of individuals that are enrolled today and what our expectation will be from now until December, and we believe we will be in the range of overspent by $800,000. The further recommendation was that beginning in 2020, we begin capping applications and such that the program would not exceed a funding allocation of $1.6 million should council choose to approve that in the budget.
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, so the first part of your recommendation, we are hearing that there would not be a cap this year, only next year.
That is correct,
if
yes.
nothing changes.
Yes.
And that being the case, then I support reviewing this at budget time, but I wanted to make sure that for the remainder of this year that we're serving the needs of those who need it the most. Thank you.
Okay, I see there's no further comments. So would you like to move the recommendation? Oh, sorry, Tori said quick.
So is the recommendation now is a referral to the budget? It's actually not the resolution that's on the report, just for clarity, that what the vote is a referral.
Okay. So is everyone clear with that? So do we need a recorded vote? Okay, show of hands. All in favor of the referral? Carried. Thank you. And back to you, Acting Chair.
Thank you very much. We move to items related to planning and growth management. I'll take chair on this, Councillor Thompson. You've held item 12.1, and I'll move it over to you for item 12.1.
I have to say the report is really good. And the provincial policy statement is is key for just about anybody that's a planner. It doesn't matter if you're in the private world or the public sector. Where I'm going with it is residentially, we nailed it, but even looking at something that we have here that's going to be talking about in camera with Brampton today is telling that we still haven't got it right. And I'm just saying I'm willing to support the report going forward, but I was asking staff if you can go back and look at employment land, especially industrial commercial. The industry is in a huge disruptive phase. It's changing so fast. And the biggest challenge we have with planning is we're trying to adapt to the market, and council gets it because we got our feet on the ground. Planners are caught because this is what the provincial policy statement tells us. I'm wondering if we can go back and look at, well, where we can find flexibility to look at how the market trends are going. A lot of stuff that was commercial is industrial and vice versa. A lot of stuff is intermixed today. And I think if you look at the appeal, I can see, and I mean, what's discussed in camera, and I'm not going to say site specific, it's examples like that that we're going to continually have problems with if we don't find a way to fix it. So what I'm saying is I'm willing to do this because residentially, you've nailed it, and it's very good, and I think it's a very concise report. What we're really missing the point on is the employment part. And I really see there's a lot of change in the industry. There's intelligent manufacturing, which is going to replace warehousing. The industry is moving so fast that government can't even keep pace. What I'm looking for is the flexibility so we don't have to go in camera to deal with issues that we're going to be doing with a little bit later here. Is there any way we can look at that?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, yes, definitely that's something that we can look at and something we have been looking at. You'll recall that through the growth management program, Council directed staff to look at a strategy for delivering on our employment projections, and also through our official plan review, we're looking at our employment policies, and in particular the new provincially significant employment zones. And you know, we're not alone. Municipalities across the province are wrestling with this issue. The old sort of more rigid policies around employment are evolving as the nature of employment changes on the one hand, but on the other hand, municipalities have to be diligent in protecting the employment lens that we have and delivering on the employment forecasts that we have. So that's certainly something that is part of our official plan review, and something that we have previously as a region asked the province to recognize in documents like the growth plan, that changing nature of employment. So that's something definitely we'll go back and look at.
I understand it. I guess this is where I'm just saying the flexibility is zoning. We're seeing disruption even in zoning because the market dictates on what develops here. We've watched a huge tidal wave when we watched the manufacturing roll out of North America, and now it's coming back in many other ways. And this is what I'm saying is, I even see it in my own local municipality where planning saying, I understand where you want to go, but the policies I have to work with here, it doesn't match. And what I'm going to say is I just wondering if you can come back with a report to find a way we can find some flexibility to make it work. Long as it's still jobs, so it's just the nature of what it's going to look like and how we can be. The marketplace is changing, so what I'm looking for is so that we can be nimble, agile, and flexible to adapt to the new trends coming in so that we're there to be receptive to the market. We get a lot, I mean, you know, businesses coming in here, we have to figure out, we got to think a little differently than what we have. And I was just wondering, is the provincial policy statement, when it's under review, is there any way we can ask to see if we can find a way to make it a little more flexible in our zoning to allow things to happen when a market drives it to thrive in a certain area, that we can make it work?
I think, Councillor, everybody around this table will agree, and I think that's good direction to give to staff and have them come back.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, is that possible? Do we have the timeline? Do we have the timeline on the policy statement review to get that where we are now? I guess that was my second question.
Through Mr. Chairman, not specifically on the policy statement. Those comments are due in the next few days, but that certainly is something that we are engaging the province on through their provincially significant employment zone consultation, and certainly something we can report back on.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sinclair.
Thank you. As part of the provincial policy review comments, are we restricted to what they're proposing for changes only, or can we also address problematic policies in the existing 2014 policies?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, certainly we can provide broad comments as well. We have focused on sort of the changes, but certainly we've identified some other opportunities for additions and refinements, particularly things around climate change and what have you.
Okay, I'd just like to raise a problem with an aggregate resources policy 2.5.2.3, which basically directs aggregate recycling facilities within operations of pits. And this is a problem for us up in Caledon, where the strip mines are all located where nature puts sand, gravel, limestone, and shale. But those locations are also where there's groundwater recharge and discharge functions. And aggregate recycling certainly increases the risk for pollution of the local groundwater table if the wrong materials end up coming in. We have no control over what they're bringing in. And an additional concern there is that the strip mines essentially never close if they become waste aggregate of all sorts and as destinations coming out of the big urban GTA. And the problem there is the strip mine complex south of Caledon Village has been underway for 70 years. And that makes a joke of the also the provincial policy that seems to say that aggregate extraction is an interim land use. Rubbish. It's over multiple generations, and this is a problem. So I don't know how we get into this late a date commenting on such a policy, but it's problematic for Caledon and could be a threat to groundwater quality and quantity in Caledon. I just make those comments, Mr. Chairman.
I think those comments are taken, and I think it's typical of, you know, this is our timeline that we have to deal with. We don't have any control over that. You know, we're like you always hear, we're creatures of the province. They say this is when you can do it. We have a regional council meeting scheduled, and this is where we are. So, thank you, Councillor Sinclair. Councillor Medeiros.
Just very quickly, I strongly support Mayor Thompson's comments. You know, one of the challenges that you find, just on a practical perspective, and you talked about how the market directs investment, we have empty land sitting around because the definitions are not zoned accordingly and don't correspond to what is considered, what is zoned for in terms of industrial use or commercial use. And then we end up, as a municipality, dealing with all the issues around it. We know how competitive attracting investment and attracting employment is, and you know, so I look forward to coming back with possible interpretations. I know, Councillor PALLESCHI, you've talked about that at the City of Brampton many times on how we, you know, the definitions of what employment is and the different uses. So we do need that flexibility, and I hope we really look at that aspect of it. Thank you.
No, you're right, Councillor Medeiros. We need clarity on the fact. Thank you, Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a couple of questions. And I think Mayor Thompson raised the flexibility in zoning. I too support that, because when I look at my Highway 50 corridor going through Bolton, we need some flexibility in zoning there to allow for intensification along that corridor and really just to clean it up, so where you'd have some commercial on the bottom, the residential up above, because right now what we have is, I think it's commercial zoning. So to allow for that type of intensification, I think we need to make it clear to the province or advocate for those flexible zoning there. With respect to the housing supply, and I know the report says it's going from 10 years to 12 years, and I know we're a little concerned with the additional 2 years of housing supply because of the demand on the infrastructure. Is the province giving us any indication that there would be any type of infrastructure money to support that?
Through Mr. Chairman, no, they're not. And through some of the other activities, such as Bill 108 and what have you, we're actually seeing a reduction in our capacity to be able to provide infrastructure and fund it, and some challenges around that. And that's really why we're highlighting this, and that, yes, it's definitely a positive thing to be doing proactive planning ahead of time, but also you need the tools and the flexibility from the province to be able to provide the infrastructure if you're going to actually make that happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't disagree with a 12-year supply of housing. I think we need to have that so we don't end up in the supply and demand where we're seeing housing prices going through the roof, especially for younger families that are trying to afford a home. I have one other question. When the growth plan came into place, Places to Grow, you may recall, Brampton came in just before that growth plan came into place, and we were able to extend the boundaries in Northwest Brampton and take in like the entire, I think it was 6,000 acres, I'm not sure, I can't remember the number, and we were able to phase that in. And then the growth plan came in and remove our abilities to do that. And so is there any consideration of looking at that type of policy or ability?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, so that definitely is the growth plan. So there's nothing per se in the provincial policy statement which applies to all of Ontario that manages that. It really is specific to the Greater Golden Horseshoe area in the growth plan. And that is something that council and staff have been advocating for, which is the ability to implement, the major planning processes like a municipal comprehensive review through staged amendments and what have you. We remain hopeful that the province is listening, but to date we haven't seen anything, any movement or anything in writing on that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. So we have here, moved by Councillor Thompson, second by Councillor Sinclair, the comments outlined in the report of the Acting Commissioner of Public Works titled Comments on the Proposed Changes to the Provincial Policy Statement 2014 and contained in Appendix 1 to the subject report response letter to the province with detailed comments on the proposed Provincial Policy Statement 2019 be endorsed. And further, that a copy of the subject report be forwarded to the City of Brampton, Town of Caledon, City of Mississauga, and the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Show of hands. Recorded vote. As you are voting, additionally, there's direction to staff to report in relation to the nature of employment lands, jobs to allow more flexibility and eligibility in planning. In addition, report back on the aggregate policies, in particular 2.5.2.3, and efforts to work with the province to be more proactive and realistic in dealing with aggregate. Did that cover it, Councillor Sinclair? Good. And that carries. Next, we're going to move over to items related to enterprise programs and services. Councillor Fonseca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe item 14.1 was moved and 14.2.
Okay.
So back to you.
Thank you for bringing it back to me. Over to Councillor Groves, Public Works. It was held by Councillor Innes.
Yep.
17-1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Innes, you've got the floor.
Thank you. Looking at the letter from Minister Mulroney, it's pretty generic. Doesn't even mention what we actually spoke about at AMO. And I'm just wondering from staff, we had a few requests, but there were two specific that were somewhat important, and there were some commitments given from the ministry. One was in regards to the Smart Freight Center and having the province come to the table in some form of participation. It wasn't quite sure if it would be participation through sharing of data and resources, if it was a financial contribution, and there was a request that we would continue and have further dialogue about having the province at that table, because the minister did think it was a worthy project. So I'm just wondering, in a follow-up, have those conversations continued with staff between ours and the ministry?
Yep, thanks. Through the chair, that's a perfectly timed question. I was just getting an update from Gary. Our staff and their staff actually met yesterday, and it's in the province's court. Sorry, the word that was coming at me.
Duck.
It's clearly that we laid out our ask very clearly yesterday to do with funding, participation, and data. They're taking it back. They agreed wholeheartedly that it is a priority of the government, so it's in their court to come back to us. So we'd be happy to bring back that to council when we get it.
Thank you. And then secondly, we had conversations with regards to the GTA West Economic Corridor, and specifically raised the concern with regards to the timeline that the government is currently proposing of 2022, indicating how it doesn't align with any of our official plans, how there's issues with holding back and employment lands and residential growth. The minister seemed quite concerned because that's two of their top priorities of this government is jobs, creating jobs, as well as creating housing opportunities, both of which are being held back by their current timelines. And we recently had a meeting in Caledon last Thursday, I think October 3rd, for their pick on this matter. It was a steady stream of people between 4 and 8. There were hundreds of people that came out to provide comment. And almost every single person I spoke to had concerns with regards to the timeline. And even more so, I'm concerned that that timeline will just slough it off to another government, and we'll be stuck in this perpetuating circle of no answer and spending lots and lots of money and resources at this issue. So wondering if there's been any follow-up with the ministry in regards to the timeline and the GTA West corridor.
So through the chair, thanks for the question. It's a really good question. We have the MTO coming to our next council here today to present sort of their findings, as well as staff's opinion of what we saw in the PIC, the pros, the cons, that kind of thing. If I could wait until 2 weeks from now to give you a more fulsome answer, we'll give you everything we have on the planning part, the transportation part, and definitely the timing part.
Okay, sorry, and that's before they come to present?
We're doing it at the same meeting.
Time?
Yeah.
And do they have that information in advance of their presentation?
Based on the comment we just got from you, we'll make sure that they cover that.
Thank you.
Okay. Mayor Thompson.
Yeah, to follow up the GTS corridor back to Andrew, is there or Adrian, is there a way that we as council or as a lot of us that we can sit down and meet and have a conversation concerning the issues that they're talking about here? Or we can do it in a constructive workshop?
Certainly, I don't think we've thought of it that way, but we can take that as direction to think that through and come back with some proposals.
Even if we do it through growth management or something like that, if we can do that as a, because I think this is concerning to all of us here, and I think we just, Councillor Innes has brought some good points, but I think there's a lot of other stuff that's, it's touching every one of us here.
So our report in 2 weeks is just a report. Maybe we could think about having a short presentation, or at least having the right staff available at the front so we can have a more fulsome discussion.
Yeah, because I think we all need to have a, and you know, and maybe some of us can talk offline about this, but I really think we just need to, we need to be out in the open, and yeah, we have a lot of questions.
I'd be happy to do that and get your thoughts and tailor it to that.
Okay, Councillor Innes.
Sorry, one more. When we're preparing the report, could we also look at helping the province understand where in the timelines it could be shortened? Because I think that would be helpful for them to see where we see those gaps are and where some of the repetitive process is occurring.
Happy to.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I just have a comment or a little concern with this. And while you're dealing with ministry staff, Andrew, you and your staff, I'm going to go back to the 427 extension again. I saw funding that's been announced for extension and expansion of several 400 series highways. And I haven't seen anything with regards to the 427 extension. We've raised this several times at Caledon Council. This council has also passed or given their support unanimously to look at an extension of Highway 427 when we're talking about this whole smart freight center. 427 is I feel is a vital part of that infrastructure that you need in order to look at the success of the smart freight center. You need a north-south corridor. And again, Highway 50 is already beyond capacity. And we're looking at getting more transport companies along Highway 50. So I'm going to ask that you include that. I know that it was the other minister, Urick, I believe, was Minister of Transportation when we did pass that here. So if you can bring that to the attention of the new minister, that would be great, and maybe provide a report on that when you come back with the GTA West and the other. Okay. Thank you. So there was direction given. You have direction. I don't know that I need a motion. I guess a show of hands, all in favor of the direction given to staff. That is carried. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. We move over to item 19.2, a motion regarding the use of vapor products and related health impacts as requested by Councillor McFadden. Councillor McFadden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly in anticipation of the report coming from the Medical Officer Health in November, I want to add some teeth to this report, if you don't mind. I'm seeing a lot of concern around the vaping with our youth, and certainly the deaths that are occurring because of the lack of information that is out there for them. And I think that what I would like to see is the Region Appeal coordinate with our school boards for education, and as well to have some tools on our website for parents to be able to access to help their children and to get support for these kinds of issues moving forward if need be. I think that this is an epidemic that we're seeing out there, and it concerns me a lot, certainly as a grandmother, and all of us are either parents or grandmothers around this room. So we certainly need to nip this in the bud, and I know that our Medical Officer of Health is working on that report, and I'm sure that she will include those issues that I brought up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor McFadden. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Councillor McFadden. If you don't have a seconder for your motion, I'm happy to second that, and I fully support what it is that what your concerns are, because I too have the same concerns, and I know that these kids, they think they know everything, and when you tell them these things, they no, it's so they really need a dose of reality, and really when we're out there educating or raising awareness, we really need to not soften it, but give it to them how, what this can do to you. And I know we had a conversation, Dr. Hopkins, a couple of years back, and one of the concerns you had was that this thing was so new that we wouldn't know what the long-term effects are, but we are seeing those effects now. So Councillor McFadden, thank you for bringing that forward. And are we able to take this to the province? Because I think colleges and universities need to be included here. Because this vaping, it's just become the new thing, and it's cool, but it is harmful.
So through the chair, the report is on the roster to come on November 14th. This will include a social media campaign with respect to youth vaping, education. We work with the school boards, as well as potential advocacy positions for council's consideration with respect to the province on this issue.
Yeah, I think it does need to go to the province, because the side effects and the health issues that it's causing is going to be a huge increase on our healthcare system. So we need to nip it, and we need to prevent any more of these deaths or illnesses related to vaping and really get out there. And I'm even thinking even our libraries, community centers within our municipalities, that we can run those ads and campaigns through those as well. So I look forward to when the report comes back. And Councillor McFadden, thank you again for bringing this forward.
Thank you, Councillor Groves. The details as discussed will come back in the report, and that's direction. Members, you have before you the motion and be taken as read, moved by Councillor McFadden, seconded by Councillor Groves. Recorded vote. And that carries. So now we're going to be moving down to the in-camera. And we're also going to be bringing back into, just to report in public, 21.6, Employment Services Transformation, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. And somebody, Councillor Mahoney, will move us into camera.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair, but I thought we moved everything in camera through consent.
We did not.
We did not? Okay, I'll move us in camera then.
Close one. If we can have anybody that isn't supposed to be here, exit stage right or left. The doors are open. Resolution for the in-camera, moved by Councillor Medeiros, seconded by Councillor McFadden. Further, that the in-camera report listed as item 21.4 on the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council agenda be received, and further that the confidential report being item 21.6 listed on the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council agenda be deferred to October 24th, 2019, and further that the in-camera direction related to item 21.7 on the October 10th, 2019 Regional Council agenda be received, and further that the in-camera correspondence listed as item 21.8 be received. Recorded vote. Councillor Parrish.
In Mississauga, when we finish our in-camera sessions, when we go out of the in-camera session, we actually describe exactly what's contained in each of the motions. There's no more secret once it's passed in public session. I notice here we keep them secret. When we come out of in-camera, they're still listed as some mysterious number dealing with some mysterious subject. I would like to know before the next council meeting, I imagine people have to put their heads together and figure out which one of us is doing it the right way, whether it's the Region of Peel or whether it's Mississauga.
Sure.
It would be
I
helpful.
think Brampton does it a little bit differently as well, but I did read every single item prior to going in camera, and then what I just wrote, because there were some changes, there was a lot of direction
No,
given.
no, I'm not being critical of what you've done. I would never dream of doing that unless you're
understand
standing right
that.
beside me and I can give you a poke. But I just want to know why, when we come out of in-camera, even when it's something to do with property acquisitions or whatever, the actual address is there, the amount we paid's there, all the details there. We don't do that here. I just want to know which one's the right one, or are both options available to us? And I don't need it today. I just would like it before the next in-camera session.
Okay, and I think we can provide you maybe with examples of us making a decision in camera, and then that decision is final and actually releasing it out to public. Today, we're talking mainly about things that direction was provided, but there are ongoing tribunals and whatnot.
I think Catherine understands.
And that carries.
They had to finish voting.
Oh, we have to finish voting. Mr. Mayor. Okay, we're good. Now it carries. The bylaw to confirm the proceeding is council, that the bylaw 60-2019 to confirm the proceedings of regional council at its meeting held October 10th, 2019, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the region appeal bylaws related thereto, be given the required numbers, reading taken as read, signed by the regional chair and the regional clerk, and the corporate seal affixed thereto. It's been moved by Councillor Vicente, second by Councillor Sinclair. All in favor? Carried. Adjournment. Moved by Councillor Demerla, seconded by Councillor Dasco. All in favor? Carries. Have a great day, everybody.